Last month, my friends and I all decided to make our own presentations on whatever topic we wanted. Some were funny and some were informative. Mine fell somewhere in between. I've been on a huge Kirby kick for a good couple of months now, since the announcement of Kirby Air Riders, so I decided to make my presentation about a speculative topic regarding the game. The video you're about to see is an edited version of that presentation, so I hope you all enjoy. Kirby Air Riders is the newest entry in the Kirby Air Ride series. Well, I say series, but there's only 2 games, so I don't really know what you'd refer to it as, but regardless, it's been over 20 years since the last entry, and anticipation is very high. This entry features tons of new features, featuring one feature in particular fans were hoping for in a new entry. That, of course, being a bigger roster of playable characters. In the first game, you could play as King Dedede and Meta Knight, but they were treated more as separate machines rather than a selectable character. You couldn't change the machines they rode, and they were only available in the free-run versions of Air Ride and City Trial. However, this time around, we have a lot to choose from. This is the current known roster of the characters in Air Riders. They're available in all modes confirmed as of right now, they can all use copy abilities, and they have different stats, abilities, and special moves at their disposal. This roster has 2 genres of Kirby characters within it, the first of which being major mainstays. These are characters who appear frequently throughout the Kirby series and have strong presence in whichever story they appear in. These are characters like Meta Knight, one of the 4 integral characters to the Kirby franchise, Magolor, who has made numerous appearances since his debut in Return to Dreamland for the Wii, Gooey, who made his first playable appearance in Dreamland 3 and was forgotten for a while, but made a significant comeback in more recent years, and a few more characters that have or haven't been confirmed for the Air Riders roster. The other genre of the roster consists of NPC or side characters. These are characters who usually appear as enemies and don't serve any notable purposes to the stories that the games take place in, such as Waddle-Doo, who is their main holder of the beam ability throughout many of the games, Starman, who made their playable debut in Air Riders despite having very little presence in most of the Kirby franchise, and Knuckle Joe, who has actually been playable in mainline entries before, such as Superstar and Star Allies, but still isn't recognized as having the same importance as the previously mentioned mainstays. These characters are similar to that of the NPC racers in Mario Kart World in that despite their lack of general importance to the franchise as a whole, that doesn't stop them from earning a spot on the roster of playable characters. But with the announcement of Air Riders having a proper character roster and a load of characters to choose from, both new and old, it has led people to speculate on if the full roster will have any characters leaning on the more obscure side. These are characters who are considered unimportant to the greater Kirby series, yet still serve notable roles within their home games. These are characters like Prince Fluff from Epic Yarn, Eileen from Rainbow Curse, or the Switch I don't remember the name of from Star Stacker, all characters who were considered major players in their debuts but didn't really have any notable appearances outside of said debuts. But I'd like to discuss one character in particular today, someone who is extremely popular with Kirby fans and, despite his lack of appearances, still seems to be held in fairly high regard with the higher-ups, that of course being Escargoon. This is why I think Escargoon could be in the Kirby Air Riders roster. Now, while he is very popular amongst the Kirby fandom, some of you may be wondering,
oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no.
So I will illuminate you on who this character is and where he hails from. Escargoon comes from Kirby of the Stars, also known as Kirby Right Back At Ya. It's Kirby's first and only attempt at an anime adaptation. It's a show that follows Kirby fighting off monsters ordered from King Dedede via Nightmare Enterprises in order to protect his new home in Cappy Town. A lot of new faces were introduced to the series. There's Tiff and Tuff, who act as secondary protagonists next to Kirby, the NME salesman who sends the monsters over to King Dedede, and of course, today's subject, Lord Escargoon, who I now learned was only called that once and never again, so I will follow suit in never calling him that ever again. Escargoon is King Dedede's right-hand man. He acts as the secondary antagonist of the show. He's a sleazy slug, a real slippery snail, for lack of a better term. If Dedede has an idea on how to get rid of Kirby, Escargoon encourages it, though that doesn't necessarily mean the king sees him as an equal, as Escargoon is usually the victim to most of Dedede's tantrums. He doesn't have much of a backbone and usually folds to Dedede's schemes whether he wants to or not, though throughout how much they bicker, it's clear that they both somewhat care for each other. I'm going to split this into 3 categories. The first category will be explaining the connections between the Kirby anime and the original Kirby Air Ride. The second category will be diving into HAL Laboratory and Masahiro Sakurai's connections to the anime. And lastly, I will be giving my 2 cents on how I think Escargoon could operate as a playable character in Air Riders. Air Ride is one of the 4 Kirby games that has strong connections to the anime, mainly because it was developed and released during Right Back At Ya's run. A lot of people know that Air Ride had a pretty short time span to meet for development, so in order to cut costs, a lot of Air Ride's music was taken directly from the anime, such as Checker Nights, the Item Bounce event, and most notably the Kirby Melee theme, which uses the motif of the anime's main theme song, Kirby March. And I haven't even gotten to mention that in the finale of the anime, they had an entire episode dedicated to fighting off enemies that, in order to match Kirby's Warp Star, used various machines from Air Ride. Okay, so this was all stuff from my presentation a few weeks ago, but I have an update to this category that I'd like to make. I thought only a few of the anime's music made it into the original Air Ride, when in reality, more than half of the music in City Trial originates from the anime. Most of it can be heard in the events, but there's also a few stadiums that reuse anime music. Again, nothing too concrete, but it does show that these 2 pieces of Kirby media share DNA. And that's pretty much it for this category. So, Now, even though it's not too often that HAL will recognize Kirby Right Back At Ya's existence, it's clear that HAL still holds the show in fairly high regard. They've referenced the show in a few promotional artworks, including an entire merch line where Kirby holds his own plushies of Tiff and Tuff. And there's a few more game references than you'd expect. Star Allies had a few nods to the anime and some minor character cameos along with it, but the most prominent anime references can be found in the Kirby Mass Attack sub-games. Characters like Max Flexor as a boss in Kirby Quest, the NME salesman in the game over screen of Patrol EOS, and even our main subject of today, Escargoon, makes a small cameo in one of King Dedede's attacks in the previously mentioned Kirby Quest. As for Masahiro Sakurai, according to interviews and articles, he was heavily involved with the anime, though it's a little vague on how exactly he assisted in its creation. The main things that we know is that he drafted the initial proposal for the show, and that he set a lot of guidelines for the directors to follow, such as Kirby not being allowed to speak, and that there should be no human beings in the universe of the show. Sakurai also had the Japanese voices of Meta Knight and Knuckle Joe reprise their roles for Super Smash Bros. Admittedly, I'm not entirely sure how Sakurai feels about Escargoon as a character, though considering he was involved with the show's Bible and allowed a character like him to exist, we can assume that he may be at least a little fond of him, but this is all mainly set up to my next point. Hi, butting in here again. Back when I was working on this presentation, I saw a tweet claiming that the Japanese voice actor for the NME salesman also voices the Japanese announcer in Air Riders. I was intrigued, but I didn't have any actual proof of this, so I decided not to mention this in the final presentation. But a few days ago, I decided to do what I should have just done all along and check for myself. I needed to find a clip of the NME salesman yelling something to match the energy of the Air Riders announcer. I landed on the episode Kirby Quiz, as I knew he had a big role in that story, and not only did I find a clip of him yelling, but it was a clip of him yelling START, which is what the Air Riders announcer says at the beginning of a race. So I compared the 2 clips, and this is how they sound.
始めます。いきなり海の水が割れて
I don't know about you guys, but after hearing them side by side, it really does seem to be the same voice actor. In all fairness, this wouldn't be his first time returning to the Kirby series, as he did reprise his role from the anime as Nightmare in Super Kirby Clash, a Switch game from 2019. Though that was directed by HAL, the fact that Sakurai is going out of his way to recruit a voice actor from the 20-year-old anime to this day mean that he does hold the show in some high regard that may have been higher than we initially thought. I'd like to talk to you all about a rather sensitive topic in the Kirby hemisphere, a term dreaded by many fans known as Sakurai Bias. This term was coined by Sakurai's seemingly strict representation for Kirby in the Super Smash Bros. Franchise. While there were tons of new compositions, stages, items, and 3 characters from the games that he made, the representation of the games that he didn't have involvement in was pretty lackluster. Now, I know I already grouped the roster into 2 genres earlier, but there's actually 2 other categories we can group them into, these being Sakurai characters and non-Sakurai characters. Non-Sakurai characters are from games after his leave from HAL Laboratories or characters from Kirby games that he had no involvement in. For example, some non-Sakurai characters that haven't been confirmed for the roster yet are Adeleine from Crystal Shards, Elfilin from Forgotten Land, and Taranza from Triple Deluxe. Oh, sorry, wrong picture. These 3 are from games that he either had very little to no involvement on. As for characters like Marks from Superstar, Mr. Frosty from the same game, and Smearer, who I really want in Air Riders, all come from games that Sakurai was heavily involved with and as a result, hold a higher chance of getting in the roster than the characters he didn't create. Shortly after Air Riders was revealed, everyone immediately started speculating on if the game would have a proper character roster this time, though this also led many to worry about how Sakurai would handle the character choices and if we would even have any non-Sakurai characters to play as. Judging from Smash, the community had little hope, but despite the odds, Sakurai managed to, and I quote, beat the allegations by adding a few characters from Kirby games he was not affiliated with. And while that's all very well and good, you can still tell he does seem to prioritize the characters he created more. As an example, here are all the non-Sakurai characters currently confirmed for Air Riders. And here are the Sakurai characters. Now, in all fairness, most of these guys, important or not, have been in the Kirby series for decades, so I doubt Sakurai is making these picks solely on who he personally likes, besides Starman. However, the reason I bring all this up is because if we assume Sakurai prioritizes the characters from his projects, then that would mean Escargoon's chances are raised, as he does originate from a piece of Kirby media Sakurai was directly involved with. Now we're going to get into how I think Escargoon will operate as a playable character. Full disclosure, this is going to be a lot more of an imaginative category, and by no means do I think it to be the definitive concept for how he'd play, so don't treat what I say as gospel here. And please, if you have any ideas of how you think Escargoon could play, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. In the anime, Escargoon doesn't really have any notable abilities when it comes to combat or movement, so giving him a gimmick was pretty hard to do. Sakurai touched upon how when choosing the characters, he wanted to focus in more on individuality than importance. That's why characters like Galactonite aren't in, because the sword-fighting archetype is filled out by another character, of course being Meta Knight. Though the way that some of these gimmicks operate are similar to one another. For instance, Meta Knight and King Dedede's abilities are very similar to each other in which they both attack when an opponent/enemy is nearby, with the main difference being the properties of their weapons being a sword and a hammer. I tell you all this as it's the route I decided to go for with Escargoon's ability, as he will be sharing a similar defensive gimmick to Cappy. Cappy's ability is that they are able to tank a few attacks thanks to their mushroom cap, but after a few hits it will be knocked off their head, making them vulnerable to attacks. Escargoon will similarly be able to block attacks with his shell, but there are 2 main differences. One is that the shell is completely, meaning there's no way to remove his defense. I did also consider having it so it would have a certain amount of HP, and after it broke, Escargoon would gain a speed boost as he would embarrassingly try to escape public nudity, but I feel that's not something Nintendo in this day and age would approve of.
They stole it from me, Carmine! They took—
Naked Escargoon.
The second difference to act as a counterbalance to the invincibility is that the shell will only protect Escargoon from behind. He would be completely vulnerable from the sides and the front. He also wouldn't be able to block attacks with huge hitboxes like a fully charged plasma shot or a bomb. Other than that, regular attacks or copy abilities won't do much to slow him down if you're behind him. As for his special move, this was also a little hard to decide on. I thought about having him turn into that gross tongue monster that Enemy transforms him into, but that thing was extremely slow, and I don't want the pace of the game to be lowered when playing as Escargoon, especially when using a special. So what I decided on is this. In the anime, Escargoon builds a robot clone of himself called Escardroid as a means to serve Dedede without having to endure the abuse he puts him through. After it gets destroyed a few times, Escargoon has it sent to NME for an upgrade. When it returns, it becomes a lot sturdier than before, but another upgrade was secretly added that could only be activated through a button. Dedede, although advised not to, presses said button, which turns Escardroid into a full-blown battlebot. It has jets that give it a drastic boost in agility, wings to help it glide, and missiles that home onto Kirby. I think it'd be cool if Escardroid swooped in for Escargoon to ride on, for an added speed boost, better airtime, and the previously mentioned homing missiles that go for whichever opponent is in front or even beside him as an extra measure for chaos. I like the idea of Escargoon being deceptively useful. Although he doesn't have many offensive abilities like most of the other characters, and his protective shell, while occasionally useful, may be hard to get the hang of, if you let him get too far ahead of you, getting past him will be that much more of a pain. Like, although it's hard, if you learn to master defending with his shell, your races or city trials will be a clean sweep. We've now gone over all the categories I'd said I'd cover, but the final point I'd like to bring up is why? Why Escargoon in particular? If we're talking about importance to the anime, Tiff and Tuff are the obvious choices. Escargoon has next to no relevancy outside of the few cameos here and there, so why choose this strange deep-cut character who doesn't even originate from the games over much more prominent game characters? Well, you know who he's relevant to? Me. And by proxy, a good chunk of the Kirby fandom. Another thing Sakurai brought up explaining Starman's inclusion is how not all of the roster is made up of major characters. This was mainly to add on to his point about the individuality of how each character played, but I also do think it was a creative choice to make the roster feel fresh. If the roster only consisted of the standard Kirby cast, it wouldn't really feel all that special. That's why it's so interesting to see characters like Starman or Cappy making their playable debuts in this game. They are not important to Kirby's world at all, but that inadvertently added to the surprise factor when they got revealed. Now, don't get me wrong, what I'm saying could apply to pretty much any character from the anime. In the grand scheme of things, none of them have anywhere near the importance of the game characters. But I feel none of them would manage to represent the anime in the same way that Escargoon would. Out of every original concept the anime created, everybody remembers Escargoon the most. Despite his irrelevancy, he gained an icon status of his own, and in most people's eyes, he is the face of the anime. He was funny, he made corny quips every 2 sentences. You'd think it'd get annoying, and kinda did sometimes, but it also made him pretty endearing, which I think is a good sum up of the anime. He made for one of those antagonists that you can't help but like, which made him very unique in the Kirby universe, and that's partly why so many people want to see him in the games out of any anime character, which especially picked up from the initial announcement for Air Riders. Even before we had confirmation that there would be multiple playable characters, people really wanted to see Escargoon make a proper mainstream debut in the current era of Kirby, and Air Riders would be such a great way to reintroduce him. To clarify, I'm not actually expecting to see Escargoon, or any anime character for that matter, to appear in Air Riders. As cool as it would be, I do think they will prioritize game characters over anyone else, but I know that it would make a lot of people happy, and above all else, it would be extremely funny. And that brings us to the end of my presentation. I know my reasoning pretty much just sums up to I think it would be cool, and the depth doesn't really go much further than that, but I hope you may have learned a thing or two about Kirby history on the way. The game releases about a month from the time of recording this, and I am dying to get my hands on it. This is my first time really doing a video essay, so if you guys liked it, I wouldn't mind doing it again sometime for a different topic. And if you made it this far, let me know who you want to see in the Air Riders roster. That's all from me for now, so take care and... Hold on, Oh, my bad, guys. I completely forgot I had one more point to make on Escargoon's inclusion. I've compiled a few clips to help explain my final point on the matter.
Let's go in and take a look at what all the fuss is about. I'm a reporter, so I can butt right in. Oh, that kimono works.
From the moment I laid my big old eyes on your big old head, I knew you were my love. Let me see that. I was almost worried.
You mean you were afraid for me? Thanks for caring! Believe me, it'll be cheaper than your hospital bill if you have to eat my cooking.
Think of how cozy you'll feel having me close to you all the time.
At night, just pretend the king is talking to you to doze off instantly.
Now that's embarrassing.
Honey, you don't know the meaning of embarrassing.
Majesty! Oh my goodness!
Oh, my nose. Greetings, fast food fans. His Highness does care about me. Oh, you know, I really should model.
Look at me!
I'm a sheep. I'm a mess.
あんた自分勝手でも愛してるよ陛下
今愛していると言ったぞい。
この唇に特別な意味はないんだよ
So, as you can see, I think Escargoon would add some much needed diversity in the roster. Feel Kirby series is a little lacking in that front, especially on this roster besides Meta Knight. So I think it would be really cool to see this more expanded, this side of the Kirby universe, if you know what I mean.